Yeah, my name is Logan Walter. I am a fellow Baylor grad, and I started my first day in the office at Keller Williams Dallas Preston Road, which was also my first day uh, in real estate, was January 3rd, 2022. So the first business day of 2022. I got licensed in 2021, but I was a worship minister at a church in Frisco. And small church, I was the only person on worship staff, production or otherwise. And so they needed some time. They needed an off ramp to replace me. Uh, I was the only person who knew how to operate the systems and to schedule volunteers and to do all the things that a worship pastor does. And so I gave him an off ramp that ended up lasting all the way to the end of 2021. And so my last time leading full time was the Christmas Eve service 2021, and then got into the office, and I was fully prepared to do whatever successful agents had done before me. So I started on a team at DPR. It was called Livian, and Livian is based in Vermont, had a DFW location at the time that was headquartered at DPR. And so lots of different people on the team, many of which are still at DPR, Natalie Thanatheo um, and Brian Forrest, Lady Forrest, some people who have had a great impact on DPR. And so these people had done a lot of business, and I just said, "What are you doing? I'm willing to do whatever it takes." And so I started by um, calling expireds every morning. There weren't many of those in January 2022. And if you'll recall, I mean, I would open up the expired list for all of North Texas, and it's like, oh, great, three listings were canceled. Amongst that's Waco to Oklahoma, Louisiana to Abilene, three listings had
Oh,
expired, and they all got 200 calls each. So
yeah.
not super fruitful, but I think the exercise of getting up and being willing to make those calls and and getting yelled at by people who had already received 100 calls was just a humbling experience. And then open houses were hopping at that time. So it's interesting how the industry is always changing and the lead sources can change. Like at that time, um, the open houses, you'd have 100 people come through an open house. And
I
so I,
had 200 once, and that was a wreck. I'd never even seen anything like that. And it was like a bouncer at a club. We could
yeah,
only let a certain number of people in at any given time. It was stupid. It was
yeah.
stupid.
Yeah, I think we reached I was fortunate to get in just to experience that because you had to understand some forms that if an agent's getting in now, you don't have to understand some of those forms, like partial appraisal waiver, full appraisal waiver, like all those things. And then even how to handle multiple offer scenarios. And so I got a quick dose of that. And then about 6 months into my career, it was over. Okay. Right. I mean, Memorial Day 2022. But then expired started to pick up, right? We started to see more listings expire, more listings canceled. And so that discipline of getting up and basically being willing to do whatever was required. Okay. At one time, open house leads were really hot and then expireds were really hot. And one thing that I knew was required was to not be a secret agent. Okay.
Amen.
Everybody I knew to know that I was an agent. So every single person uh, whose address I had on file for one reason or another. They didn't have to know me very well, but if I knew their address, I knew them well enough to send them a Christmas card. And so, right before I jumped in, Christmas 2021, I sent out a few hundred Christmas cards saying, "Here's my family," and on the back, "Here's what I'm doing. Here's how I would love to help you. Here's my heart behind it." Just right out front. I'm not trying to be a secret agent. I started a YouTube channel. I started a local Facebook group for Frisco, and neither of those bore any fruit for a very long time. But my method was do everything and see what's working, right? And always be planting seeds for long term growth and going out on the hunt for the food needed for this month, right? And
Yes.
so I was doing both of those things, farming and hunting, as we can call it. And so by the end of 2022, from what I can tell, 2022 was perhaps the most volatile year in the history of real estate. Not necessarily the worst year in the history of real estate, but extremely volatile in the sense that at the beginning, I had a 1,700 square foot house in Dallas, 1,700 square foot listing, and immediately had four offers, six figures above list price, right? To the end of the year, when it was just, listings were canceling, expiring, and price reductions, and the quickest interest rate hike in the history of the country. And so, a very volatile year, and had enough experience with both a hot market and a cold market under my belt that I felt like it made sense to go out and be a solo agent and start getting my own feet underneath me. And so, um, the main thing that I want to share today, because I think it's helpful when there's somewhat of a theme to what we're talking about in any given moment, whether it's a sermon or something like this. Whenever a pastor tries to give 10 points in a sermon, I don't remember any of the sermon, right? But if the pastor gives one point that is
Right.
helpful, I tend to be able to grasp that and remember it a long time later. And so here would be my one thing that I would like to share today. The one thing I would like to share is this: tell the story. Tell the story of what you're doing. Okay. And I'll tell you my initial experience with that. I was at a church in Austin that it was this big ministry. I was one of many music ministers on staff at this church. And it had grown to the point that the drum where they used to play basketball, UT, Frank Irwin Center, is that what it was called?
Yes. Uh-huh.
Yeah, Irwin Center.
I saw
We
Janet Jackson play there. Woo-hoo.
Hey,
Right.
yeah, it's where Kevin Durant played. I mean, lots of stuff happened there. We held an Easter service in that arena, and again, I was not the only worship leader on staff. It was a big church, lots of big staff, and the place was packed. The Easter service filled up the entire arena, and so God was really blessing this church. And yet, we had somebody come over from South Africa to visit to see what we were doing because he said, "I can't tell what you're doing." He said, "I know that things are going well. I know that you're doing things well, but nobody knows what you're doing. You're not telling the story of what you're doing." And so from that, the church decided to start a story team. Okay, so it was a collection of videographers and writers and people who would tell the story of what the church was doing, tell the story of what was happening with people in our church, and so we started putting out the story. Now, I eventually left that church and moved here. And when COVID hit, I was looking at what that church was doing and thinking, boy, I wish I had that. I wish I had a story team, when COVID hit and we're all on lockdown. And the only way to get any kind of message out there is to be telling the story through video. I wish I had that. And so when I got into real estate, first of all, the church I was at in Frisco at the time, I had to figure out how to do that. I had to figure out how to tell the story. Otherwise, nobody was going to hear anything. Everybody was locked down at home, right? So I had to create a version of that at my church in Frisco. And then when I got into real estate, I had that in my mind that nobody's going to be knowing what I'm doing in real estate. Nobody's going to be knowing that open houses are so hot and there's no expireds. And here's I'm door knocking and here's the things that I'm doing and here's how I'm trying to serve my clients well. Nobody's going to know that unless I'm telling the story of what I'm doing. And I so wish that as I was getting into real estate, what I really wanted was content of people telling the story. What does it look like to be a realtor day to day? And what I really needed, and I got so overwhelmed I didn't do it. I wish that somebody had vlogged, which if we know any like new realtors getting in that are really hustling, we need to pitch this to them. Their first,
There's four or five of them on here. Curtis, Eric,
okay.
Jason. So yes.
So tell the story of what you're doing from the ground up. Okay. There's a there's an episode of Million Dollar Listing New York where this realtor is trying to cut time out of his busy life to date, and so he takes this girl on the date, and it's really embarrassing. It turns out she is not a good fit for him. But one thing that she says that was hilarious, and she had had a little bit of wine. She said, um, "Yeah, real estate. I just don't think I could ever be a realtor because I just don't want to start from the bottom and work my way up." And he died laughing because at least that's self-aware, right? I mean, that is what it is. Like you are always starting at the bottom and working your way up. And so what I wanted was somebody to tell the story of how they started at the bottom and what did each step look like to go on the way up. But even once you've done deals, I think that um, that has a compounding effect. It builds trust with people if you're telling the story of what you're doing. So a few ways that I do that. One is um, my client base knows every time that a listing is under contract, every time that there's a closing, I am telling the story of how that happened and what happened. Okay, so with every closing, there is a story. I'm about to film a couple this afternoon. I write the scripts for them. Okay, so one script, a couple got into a house in Little Elm, and what is the story there? Okay, and the story is that I hear younger generations lament all the time about how, their grandparents got to buy this great house in Dallas and now that's unaffordable. And then their parents bought this house in Plano and now I can't afford that. And then their older cousins or whoever, where they were able to buy in Frisco prosper and now that's unaffordable, and everybody is always lamenting about wishing they could have the experience of some previous generation. Well, the story is current generations are currently still finding ways to get ahead of that appreciation, right? And one of the ways you can do that is a place like Little Elm. Okay, it's not Highland Park, it's not Plano. Maybe a Gen Z couple's not able to afford Frisco, but think about Gen Alpha. Think about the generations, 50 years from now. They're going to look back at Gen Z able to buy houses in Plano, right near Lake Louisville, right near Frisco, easy access to all these different places. They're going to say, I wish I could have bought in Little Elm, right? And so just telling the story of that closing, why that was a good deal, and then my other story that I'm going to be telling is a couple that upsized, and so I'm going to be talking about what it looks like to upsize, and let's say there's 5% appreciation per year, and over the next 10 years, or let's say the next 15 years, that we average 5% appreciation. Okay, now we haven't had 5% appreciation necessarily the last couple of years, but historically that would be very normal to have 5% appreciation. Now I had to go on Chat GPT and figure out what is 5% appreciation per year on certain numbers, and it'll tell you. But the truth is, they are trying to upsize from a $300,000 house to a $650,000 house. Okay, if they were to do that right now, it's a $350,000 gap, right? If they were to try to do that 15 years from now, it would be almost $750,000 a gap between those two houses. As both appreciate 5% per year, this is how much that gap is widening between their current house and the house they want to upsize to. And so just helping people understand, like, yes, there are reasons to wait, if you need to be financially stable in order to make that move. But the longer you wait to upsize, the bigger of a gap there's going to be between your current house and that next house. And so telling that story, I'm always looking to tell the story of what I'm doing and why I'm doing it. So I do that through Instagram stories. I do that through Reels. I do that through my YouTube channel. And then I do that through local Facebook groups. And so, as far as telling you guys the story, because my main sources of leads are my sphere and then my local Facebook groups. Okay. And so anytime I am posting a story, it's not because I think that somebody is going to subscribe to my Instagram or follow my personal Facebook who doesn't know me at all. It's because every single person that I'm friends with or has had any connection with me in any way, they all know lots of realtors. They all have options for lots of realtors. And so why would they trust me instead of their cousin who just got licensed this past, 6 months ago? And so every time I'm telling a story, I'm trying to build trust with the people who already know me, right? And then trust that they will also recommend me to other and that sphere will expand. And so one way that I'm expanding my sphere is through local Facebook groups. And uh, I started the Frisco Community Guide Facebook group. I got up every morning, 6 o'clock in the morning. I would schedule a post for every hour of the day. Okay, you can schedule posts. And so I would, I go on visitfrisco.com, anything new there. Frisco Enterprise, anything new. Anything from the Dallas Morning News that would be helpful. Anything from the local fire department Facebook page, the local police department Facebook page, Frisco ISD Facebook page. There are all sorts of sources of information to keep the community informed on what's happening in the community. And so just starting with what would be valuable to people in the community to know that's happening. Some people may care
Logan, I
about
think,
that.
sorry for interrupting. I think it's what's in it for me. And when I hear that, I think you're not just posting pretty pictures, right? You're informing them of here's what's going this affects you and impacts you. So I think that's why it resonates with so many people.
I mean, I appreciate you saying that. I mean, it really is. I think it's Gary V who has a book or maybe just an article or something called Jab, 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 Hook. Have you heard of this concept?
Right.
Now, that's kind of a violent imagery, right? I'm not saying that that's actually what I'm doing with the Frisco Community Guide, but as a principle, what it's saying is you can't just go in, give me a listing. You know what I mean? Like you can't just go in right away and go for the left hook. People are gonna be like, whoa, 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 you know? But you kind of have to set that up a little bit. All right.
Yes.
I'm helping you with this, I'm helping you with that, and then now can we be in this together? That's doesn't exactly work as it works for Gary V to
Right.
share it that way. Um, but my way of just doing that incremental, I'm trying to help is providing insight to people about what's happening in the community, providing the story of what I'm doing and how that can be helpful. Here's different areas where you might be able to get ahead of the appreciation. Here's what's happening in the industry. Here's a market update. Hopefully, this is helpful. So that when somebody needs to list their house, it's not so much of a reach to try to make that connection and to help them out. So I'm always telling the story of what I'm doing. I always need to get better at telling the story of what I'm doing. I'm trying to figure out ways to improve at telling the story of what I'm doing. The latest thing that happened was I had a client who got under contract on a house in Plano, and he was going to fully renovate the house. He has a background in videography. The person who he's friends with who was going to renovate a house, she was trying to start a YouTube channel. I'm a realtor who's trying to tell the story. So we all got together and decided here's what we're going to do. The first episode of this series will be me showing them this house, right? And as a videographer, he helped us out by filming it and editing it, right? As a realtor, I'm helping them out with the house, but more importantly, the interior designer gave him a little bit of a discount. I would think, I'm not sure exactly what happened, but we were all helping each other out. And part of that was I just get to tell the story of how we did this showing and then eventually how they renovated this house. Okay, so I'm always looking for ways to tell the story better, and I really think that that is what has helped me stay connected to people.
It has been for sure your secret sauce. And I think most of us know it. And yet we fall into these traps. And when I say that, all we see is we see on Facebook or we see on Instagram agents that are showing keys and popping bottles at the end of the process, right? They show the celebratory, the pretty side, not the ugly side of what we do. And I've said it for 17 years now. We need to show the community everything because our peers, they look at us and they think all we do is open doors and cash checks.
Yeah.
And that's why they don't have the respect for us because they think that's all we do.
Hmm.
And so I appreciate you telling the story. And I believe more of us today are starting to move in that direction because there's an ugly side to this business, right? Sometimes it's repairs. I'm going through right now, hopefully by 5 o'clock today, we'll have this settled, fingers crossed. But we've had sewer issues. We're having to replace plumbing to the tune of over $40,000, right? Which is ugly. right? And we've got roof issues, all those things. But I think more of us need to tell the story. And again, I think that's why your success has been so explosive because you've done an amazing job of that. And I know you think you need to do a better job. I'm telling you, you're miles ahead of most of us, even myself. So I'm learning from the young gun, and that's why I was so thrilled to have you here. And I can tell you, Sam has jumped on. I see David Saka. These are some young guys, Logan, in the office. Jason, Eric, Wes, Curtis, that are coming up. And these guys, I can tell you, they've gotten a nugget from you. I see other veterans on here that I respect,
Absolutely.
like Richie and John and Monique, these guys I have the utmost respect for, and I can tell you they've got a nugget. So because time flies, so I want to ask a couple other things with your like your Frisco community guide. Is that your largest Facebook group? And if so, how many visitors, members do you have?
Yeah, that's a great question. So first of all, I have a VA, and I started by personally doing all of this myself. Now I have a VA who's running it, and so anytime I'm adding something, I'm just adding in addition to what she's posting. Now she's posting as me, okay? But every morning on WhatsApp, she informs me of several things, and I keep adding to the list of things I want her to send me, okay? The first thing she sends me is a screenshot of Market Watch from from the MLS, and she does that for the entire North Texas MLS, for Dallas County, Denton County, Collin County, and Tarrant County. Okay. The second thing she sends me is the Mortgage News Daily, the rates. Okay. So that I can know that today we're at 6.91 for a 30-year fix, which is actually down a little bit. And then she sends me traffic to my website. Okay, who all came to my website that day? And that's because I'm trying to funnel people from my Facebook groups to my website. I want to know how that's going. And then this is the most time intensive thing for her. She sends me all of my groups, how many members, how many new members, and then for her posts, how many people, how many likes she got, how many comments, and how many active members. Okay, and so uh, she just deleted. She's still getting that information for today. But I can tell you, yesterday, uh, my biggest group is the Frisco Community Guide, and it has 30,337 members. Okay, so we crossed that 30,000 mark, and then of all my groups combined, I have currently 74,038 members. I'm sorry, I'm looking at the wrong thing. Okay.
It's impressive, regardless.
Yeah, here's today. 76,428 members. And that interest rate was too I knew that interest rate was too low. It's 7.07 today. But she always sends me active members, how many people are actively on the groups each day, how many total members, how many likes, how many comments, how many posts. Okay. And then who's visiting my website from those. And so I always want to keep track of all that content. But the point being, yeah, Frisco is by far my biggest. It's 32,000 or so. And then all combined, the groups are 76,000.
Those numbers are mind blowing and so impressive to me. I'm sitting here I'm just trying to get to 1,000 on my YouTube channel, right? So I'm
Oh,
and we're going to we're stepping it up. So I appreciate you sharing this because I think, like I said, I think that's been part of your secret sauce and the fact that you tell the story. Now, do you ask your clients, do you ask them what their favorite tune is? Because I've seen a post of yours and I know there's always music involved.
yeah.
So tell me about that.
I always have yeah, I want them to feel involved. And so I always ask them for a closing song. And so they'll say, signed, sealed, delivered by Stevie Wonder. And so I'll say, here's the story of what happened. I'm so excited for this couple. Here's the closing song, and it's Stevie. And then it'll be like a picture. It'll be like Stevie Wonder, and then it's a picture of us, at the closing. And that's how each video ends, is with them choosing a closing song. Now, you got to be careful with YouTube because they'll flag those copyrighted songs.
Okay.
But Instagram and Facebook typically lets it stay up. So, yeah, it's a way of them. I always tell a closing story, ask for a closing song, and then I send them an email that includes a video of how to file for your homestead exemption. Okay, so if the closing happens in Collin County, I have a YouTube video filing for homestead exemption in Collin County. I send that to them and I send a link for a Google review and a link for a Zillow review.
I was
And so,
just about to ask, with all those members and I think having them participate, have you found that your reviews have increased significantly because of their involvement?
yeah, I still need to be better about asking for reviews, and I didn't start a Google page until pretty late in the process. But um, I am I feel like it holds us accountable to treating clients well if at the end of the process we're going to be asking for a review.
Amen.
I mean, if we're not treating clients well, if there's a part of the process, I mean, even little things, and I've had to learn this the hard way, where I didn't understand um, exclusions, right? I didn't understand like the projector and the projector screen. Is the projector screen like mounted? Is it not mounted? And then my clients end up honestly losing money because we didn't exclude the right things. I mean, it really holds us accountable even to every little detail of the process. If at the end we're going to ask for a review and they're going to be honest about that. And so it holds me accountable to treating people well for the sake of treating people well. But there's also kind of a metric at the end as to whether or not that actually happened.